Alright, so Night Mode, which I've been following since around 2019, right when it started, because I'm pretty sure the first release was Everything You Need by Unlike Pluto, which I love Unlike Pluto, so yeah, that song I think first started Night Mode. But yeah, I've been following the label since it began back in 2019, and I still love everything they do. They have a great catalog of artists, and if I remember correctly, they still provide copyright-free stream permission music and stuff, and I think that's great. I think it's great to always have labels with copyright-free music or music that you're allowed to use in content and streaming, etc. That's awesome. And they just released a brand new EP on their label from the artist Wink with Thrill. And I've heard Wink from a couple other stuff in the past, a couple other labels like Hard Records, for example. And I was excited to check this out. And I'm going to review it track by track. And we are going to start with the very first single, or the very first track, which was released as the single leading up to this EP. And it is called Where to Go. Now, overall, I can kind of get the vibe of this EP starting from the single in the beginning. It's a style and sound very similar to people like Night Punk and Myrid and others like that. It's your fusion of like trap, carnival, breakstep, new school breaks, that type of stuff. And overall, I actually really like this single when it came out. The main lead in the drop sounds like a pan flute to me, or maybe it's a synth that sounds a bit like a pan flute, kind of similar to a Funny Face by Leotrix. And honestly, it has kind of grown off of me since the single came out. I feel like it's kind of empty. It relies a bit too much on the main pan flute sound lead, and you can kind of tell in the second half when things change a little bit, slightly. It feels way more empty in the second half for me, so I feel like it kind of shows how the track doesn't seem too full. But I will say there is a very good midsection. There's some nice sub as well as a trumpet. Reminds me a little bit of Shiver by Tracy a little. I actually, going back and re-listening to it for this review, I gotta say that the midsection with the trumpet has gotta be my favorite. I would still come back to this song, but it has grown off of me since it first came out. Now, second track, we have Get Away. Now, Get Away is very similar to the last track. Instead of a pan flute lead in the drop, we have what sounds like a lead of bongos. And hey, that's really cool. I actually really like a lot of what sounds like a tribal sound and influence through EDM, and I think that's great, especially in bass music. It seems to work really, really well. But the main problem with this, once again, that I have, is that it relies too much on the main lead, and it's not enough to make the track sound full, and it's once again empty. And I apologize so I do sound repetitive, but that is kind of my main problem with this EP, and I love the potential it has, and I think the production on all four of these tracks is great. I just feel like there's not enough layers and not a lot of variety and stuff happening to keep me enticed and enjoying this EP. But overall, those are really my main thoughts in Getaway. Next track we have Shaken, and I believe this is written in a half key, it sounds like it, which is cool. And we go for a little bit of a techno switch up this time on Shaken. The first drop was surprisingly minimal. There is not too much going on. There's heavier bass and percussion. The sub felt way more louder, and in a way, it felt like to cover up as if it wasn't empty, but once again, it's just really hard for me to stay interested in this track when there's really nothing happening but sub and a kick, and the change up where there's a couple extra percussive stuff added, like a clap and a hi-hat. It's not really enough to keep me enjoying. And almost like I have to force myself to enjoy a song, which doesn't really work out for me that well. But overall, this is definitely my least favorite because I felt like the very minimal switch up didn't work. And I feel like the second drop is even worse because you can really tell how empty it is once the second drop starts and those synths and the reverb on the vocals start to fade out and it's just a sudden kick. It's just not enough to keep me intrigued. And finally, we're on the last track, Tell Me Why. I'd actually really like this one. There's a good future-based lead synth and vocal samples. It sounds very mellow, and the production is simple, but I do not find this one empty. I feel like there are enough layers to keep me intrigued in this track and to enjoy it front to back. There's a good mid-section, and the second drop is very similar, but it still works really well. There's some nice repeated vocals in the drops and a couple bongos on the way, as well as there was in Getaway. And overall, it's a nice vibe. So overall, Tell Me Why is definitely, I would say, now that we're to Goguru off me, Tell Me Why is definitely the best because it's the one that sounds the fullest. And I wish that Wink was able to make all his other 3 songs on this EP fuller as much as Tell Me Why, because overall I love the ideas, I love the sound design, I love the production choices to use something that sounds like a pan flute and bongos. I love that tribal sound and influence, but overall I just wish there were a couple more layers to keep this from feeling a little flat and empty. But overall, those are my thoughts on Wink's Thrill EP. Let me know what you thought of this EP down in the comments below, if you disagree with my opinions or not. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.